Hey, thank you so much for joining us at our Crosspoint Church podcast. Now, if you're new to our podcast or maybe new to our church in general, we're just a bunch of messed up people who don't have it all together, running after a heavenly leader who loves us and meets us right where we are. We hope this message encourages you, builds your faith, and strengthens your confidence as you continue down this journey of what it means to know and follow Jesus. Enjoy this message.
How much fun is that? Hey, welcome again to Crosspoint. We're so thrilled that you're here as we wrap up this At the Movies Christmas Edition series. This series has been so much fun so far. From all of the movies that we've gotten discovered on the weekend, even the Elf movie experience here in the venue last Sunday night. How many of you were a part of that? I know I saw some of you coming in. Yeah, it's a great time. And we really are serious. If you're a guest with us, if it's your first time, or even if you've been showing up for a while or tuning in for a while, but you've just never turned in one of these connection cards, we really would love to hook you up with those free movie tickets. So let us know how we can send those your way. Hey, and speaking of online, let's show some love to our online audience this weekend, joining us from, wherever life has taken you, maybe some early Christmas celebrations. I know many already have those on the calendar this weekend. We're so thrilled that you are here, that you're tuning in with us today. Let's pray. Let me pray for you for just a second before we jump into this. God, we thank you for this time of year, for the fun and the meaning that it brings to us. And God, we pray in this time that we have together today that that's exactly what we would experience. God, that you would help us to be open to the things that you might be longing for each one of us to discover. So we give you our attention. Amen. All right, well, I am super excited to be diving into The Grinch today, and I know we all have our favorite versions of this movie. So if you saw the trailer and you were like, I cannot believe they did not play the Jim Carrey, Ron Howard version, don't worry, we've got some of that coming. Some of us are big fans of that particular one, the live action. I love that, but I also love a lot of the elements of this newer cartoon version. Some of you are like, just give me the OG. That's all I want, just the quick version of the story. So wherever you come from, there'll be a little bit of all of it. And, I don't know about you, but it seems to me that the Grinch is kind of having a moment this year. I mean, it may not be the most popular green character at the movies this Christmas season. Any Wicked fans out there? Yeah, me too. But I just feel like I've been seeing the Grinch way more this year than I have the past several years. And maybe it's because I have a 7-year-old who's really into it. This is Roman in his Grinch PJs. So we've been very much paying attention to Grinch things this year. But I think maybe the reason that the Grinch is so popular, has remained so popular for so long, is because he's just so relatable sometimes, right? Whether you are a homebody or not, I think all of us can find some things in this clip in particular that we can relate to. Check this out. That last part really gets me. Maybe you're not a boredom eater, though, like me and the Grinch. Or maybe you just don't super relate to the desire to never leave your house. Although I think post-COVID, all of us enjoy that a little more, especially this time of year. Like, yeah, if I can just stay home with my dog, that sounds kind of nice. But if you didn't find yourself in those clips, maybe you will resonate with some of these. I found some memes that made me chuckle this week. Here's the first one. My Christmas spirit versus my bank account. Some of us are feeling that right now as we're looking at the people that we still need to buy for and the fact that we've already blown through our budget. How about this one? Looking through the people you may know section on Facebook. Such an iconic line. I love that one. This next one is very personal for me this year. What I thought I would look like pregnant at Christmas versus what I actually look like. Little too real for me this year. This next one also is very true to my life these days. My toddler at every single Christmas thing we try to do. I have a 2-year-old who loves to steal the Christmas spirit. This was us at the Christmas tree farm a few weeks ago, picking out our tree, and these were the best photos available that I could get of her. So that's just what we have to remember this year. So magical. How about this one? 40-year-old dads watching football as when they smash the TV and yeet their kids across the room because their team is losing. And then they say, ooh, sorry, almost lost my cool there. Almost lost my cool. One more from Jim Carrey himself. Just so we're clear, the Grinch never hated Christmas. He hated people, which is fair, right? The Grinch is more relatable than we may at first realize. But, even as we might resonate with some of these things, of course, none of us want to be called a Grinch, right? That's not really a title that we usually self-identify with. That's a title that we like to reserve for the people who piss us off in the store parking lots, or the neighbors who don't bother to put out a single decoration, or maybe your boss when they're really stingy with your holiday PTO. Perhaps it's a title that you use when your spouse wants to watch a football game instead of another Christmas movie with you. Not that happened in my house this week. But, although we may not self-identify as a Grinch, I think if we're honest, if we really think about it, not just those examples a moment ago, but on a deeper level, as we watch these movies, we can find ourselves beginning to relate. Maybe for you can resonate with the frustration that he feels, of the chaos that seems to come with all of the high expectations and consumerism that drives this season. It's what makes this clip so funny. You're paying this off for years and years. Maybe you don't relate so much to that part of the Grinch, but maybe you are somewhat of a nonconformist, like the Grinch, and like Cindy Lou Who, really, in the movie too. And you relate to the pushback that you experience when you challenge the norms of people around you, or when you start to ask questions that no one else seems comfortable asking out loud. This is often me in my family, and I've kind of known this about myself, but I didn't realize how much this was my reputation until at Thanksgiving this year when my brother literally made my entire family sit down and watch this Nate Bargatze clip because he said it perfectly described his view of me. Check this out. It's never not funny. We love him around here, don't we? Maybe you can relate to that, right? That you also are the one that has been a bad influence on some people around you. Or maybe, as you watch The Grinch, you find yourself relating to some of the rejection that he experiences, the fears that he has of getting hurt, especially of getting hurt again. Maybe you find yourself relating to the Grinch's temptation to just withdraw, to isolate yourself as a way of protecting yourself. There's so much in this movie that we could talk about today, but one question that it raises that I want us to spend some time considering is this: where is your focus these days? It's a great question, especially at this time of year when it's so easy to find our focus being pulled in a million different directions. And so I think it's helpful the way this movie invites us to self-reflect on things like, am I, like the Who's, so focused on what needs to be done, so focused on trying to make this Christmas amazing that I'm actually missing what it's supposed to be about? One of the things that struck me more this year than it had before is the way that Cindy Lou Who's parents miss entirely what is happening with their daughter. They're so caught up with what's going on around them, with the things that they need to do, that they don't see the crisis that she's walking through. They don't really hear the questions that she's raising. I want you to take a moment to think about the people in your life, maybe your family, maybe your circles of friends, perhaps coworkers. I wonder, is there anyone in your life that perhaps could use a little more focus than you've been giving them lately? If there's a name or a couple of names that are coming to your mind, use your weekly, write those down. Perhaps that's your next step this week. For the Grinch, throughout the movie, his focus is mainly on himself. But more specifically, it's a self-centeredness that's based in his deepest fears. that is all about maintaining the modes of self-protection that he has built around himself to keep other people at a safe distance. Some of us know this life. In the story of the first Christmas, there's a character with almost an identical inclination. The biggest Grinch in that story was this guy named Herod. Now, Herod was a puppet king who was in charge of the region where Jesus was born. And when Herod catches wind that there is this baby that has been born that some people are calling the King of the Jews, he freaks out. See, he's terrified of anything that might threaten his own position. And so Herod responds to this fear by starting to grasp for control. He pretends to be someone that he's not. Eventually, he inflicts harm on other people so that they won't be able to harm him. Sounds a lot like the Grinch, right? Although Herod's version is a little more intense than stealing presents, unfortunately. But Herod was not the only one that's involved in the first Christmas who had reasons to be afraid. In fact, nearly everyone we meet has justifiable reasons to fear. And so, because of this, all throughout the story, there is this refrain that is repeated over and over. Fear not. Don't be afraid. We see it in Joseph's interaction with the angel Gabriel, and then later to the shepherds. Don't be afraid. I bring good news of great joy for all people. These same words are spoken to Mary, though her situation is interesting. I mean, we could certainly understand why she would need some reassurance like this with the news that, oh, by the way, you teenager, you're going to have a baby, and that baby will be God, right? But look at this. Look at the very beginning of Mary's story as we know it. Luke tells us, he's just told the story of this woman named Elizabeth. And so he says, in the 6 months of Elizabeth's pregnancy, in other words, a little while later, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a village in Galilee, to a young virgin named Mary. She was engaged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of King David. And Gabriel appeared to her and said, "Greetings, favored woman, the Lord is with you." Confused and disturbed, Mary tried to think what the angel could mean. "Don't be afraid, Mary," the angel told her. Now notice here, what caused fear for Mary was not initially the news of her pregnancy. They hadn't even gotten to that bit yet when the angel reassures her, "Don't be afraid." See, very soon we know that this young girl will be faced with this choice between the security of life as she'd always imagined it and the risk of saying yes to God. Very soon, she will realize that her willingness to say yes is going to jeopardize her future. It's going to jeopardize her standing into this family that she's marrying into. See, the reason that Luke tells us that Joseph was descended from King David is because that clues us into the reality that for Mary, being with Joseph was a ticket to an upgrade in social status. And yet all of that would be on the line if she says yes to carrying this child. We know that Mary will soon realize that she has many reasons to fear. The very real threat of shame, rejection, of ending up alone, possibly even death. And this is not even to mention the parts of Mary's story that there's no way she could have pre-anticipated. That from the very beginning, there would be people who would want her son dead. That she would find herself fleeing as a refugee to an unknown country. And that she would someday lose a child in a way that is unimaginable. But of course, Mary can't foresee any of that at this point. All that Mary knows is that there is this angel who has appeared to her and has said to her, greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." And she's confused and disturbed. She's trying to figure out what it all means. What was it that initially caused this fear for Mary? It might have been the mere shock of being met by an angel. I mean, that would do it for most of us. But I have to wonder if it was, at least partially, these words that had been spoken to her. Perhaps for Mary to think of herself as highly favored was so disjointed from the way that she had always seen herself that it was confusing to hear. Maybe she had at some point along the way decided that this idea that God could actually be present with us was a nice idea to make some people feel good, but it just couldn't be real based on what she had seen and experienced in her life. Could it be this idea that God was with her, that God even saw value in her, was such a shock to the system that before she would be able to hear anything else, God knew that Mary would need this reassurance. Don't be afraid. You can trust me. I wonder if you've ever found yourself in a situation where you're asking God to give you clarity or to show you the way forward. Maybe you found yourself asking God to help you out of a mess that you're in or to heal some pain that you've been experiencing. And yet the more you ask, the more the silence seems deafening. The more you ask, the more you feel like you have more questions than answers, and the way feels so unclear. In those moments in my life, often what I find in retrospect is that while I've been focused so intently on the specific answer that I'm looking for and longing for, I've actually been missing some other things that God was in the midst of trying to show me. Missing other ways that God was active in my life. There was this one time during the summer before I went to college where I was at this event and I was surrounded by all of these people who seemed so sure about where they were in life, so sure about their ability to hear from God. And I was there and just feeling so on the outside of that, feeling so unsure about all of the unknowns ahead of me. And I remember one night during that event, I found this bench outside and I sat down alone in the dark. And I prayed, I said, God, I am not getting up from this bench until you speak to me. I felt like there was something that I needed to discover. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it my way. I'm going to find out. You may not be surprised to hear that my strategy was not as effective as I hoped it would be. I kept sitting there in silence till I was cold and bored and a little afraid. And I got up, feeling defeated, walked back to the dorms where we were staying, where I was met by my now husband, who was my fairly new boyfriend at the time. And when I walked in the door, he said, "Oh, I've been looking for you." And we started talking about some other things, and eventually I circled back and I said, So what did you need from me? You said that you were looking for me. He looked at me for a moment and he said, "Oh, I just wanted to be with you." And as he said those words, it was as if God was saying the very same thing to me. I realized that perhaps while I had been so focused on trying to create this monumental moment of clarity, maybe what God was doing was just wanting to spend some time with me in silence. Because that's what we do with people we love. In the sweetest moments of life and in the darkest moments of our lives. See, sometimes in our lives, just like in Mary's in this particular moment, before we can be ready for what God has next for us, we must first be willing to stop and pay attention to what God might want to teach us about who He is and who we are. I think there's something really important here about the fact that before God would say anything else, before He said a word about this adventure that was about to completely change Mary's life, He chooses first to tell her how valuable she is, to assure her that she is not alone. See, many of us, we want a God who will say to us, "Fear not. Here's the resolution, all wrapped up with a bow. Fear not, here's the answer that you've been looking for." But what we have is a God who says, "Fear not, I will be with you. Fear not, I'll show you the way, one step at a time." We have a God who says to each of us, "I have chosen you, and you are mine. You are highly favored because I love you. I made you. And I promise I am not going to leave you on your own." Maybe today this is the place where you might need to set your focus, to allow yourself to receive the reassurance that you are not alone, that God is with you, that your life is incredibly valuable. Perhaps you need to set your focus on the fact that it is okay that you don't have all the answers you wish you had. That in the midst of all of it, don't be afraid. These are the kinds of truths that we have to revisit over and over again in our lives before they have the ability to really sink in and make a difference. And this is especially true if we've been surrounded by negative messaging, if we've been in relationships or circumstances that have repeatedly told us we're not enough, or that we better figure out how to be what we need on our own. I saw a meme this week that made a pretty good point about the Grinch. It said maybe the Grinch would be nicer if every 5 minutes a dude wasn't singing songs about what a piece of he is. Or if you want Nate Bargatze's version, what a piece of poo he is. For real though, I love how this theme plays out in the movie. Through all of the little moments when Cindy Lou Who shows up for the Grinch and speaks value over him in ways that he can't yet see for himself. Moments like this one. See, Cindy Lou Who seems to understand a theme that is central to the story of Christmas. That all throughout the story of the first Christmas, what we see is God reaching out to people who are on the margins of society, toward those who most would overlook. We see this played out in Mary's song, in this vision that she sings about this new way that Jesus would bring into the world. A power that's not like power as we know it, but that actually lifts up the humble, the forgotten, the hungry, the hurting. We see it in the surprising names that show up in Matthew's family tree of Jesus, many of whom are people who were on the outskirts that most writers would have skipped over. But yet Matthew starts his version of the story with this list. And he does so to make it really clear, hey, this is for everyone. So pay attention. We see it in the way that God decides to announce the earth-altering news of his birth first to shepherds in a field. These outcasts of society who are the first to be looped in, that God has come. Peace embodied on earth. I think we see this reflected in what's happening in our community this weekend, what's going to be happening in the parking lot on Sunday morning through the Spread Some Cheer project. meals being given. Earlier this week, gifts being delivered to people who may have otherwise been overlooked. We do this because this is one of the ways that Christmas is meant to move us, shape us, change us. Christmas calls us to turn our attention to the margins. John, who authored one of the 4 biographies of Jesus' life, describes Jesus not just reaching toward the margins, but actually becoming a person there. John's version of Jesus' origin story, unlike Matthew and Luke's, focuses not so much on the details of what happened, but on why it all mattered. And his zoomed out version of Jesus' own experience goes like this. He writes, Jesus came into the very world he created, but the world didn't recognize him. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. But to all who believed and accepted him, there were some. He gave the right to become children of God. This is that adoption piece that we talked about last weekend. They are reborn, not with a physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God. And so, knowing this would happen, Jesus, the Word, became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness. And we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. See, Christmas is not just about a birth that happened once long ago. Christmas is about the birth that continues to happen in all of us when we turn our focus toward this God who came to make his home among us, who moved into our neighborhood so that we might know him, so that we might be filled with his unfailing love and faithfulness, so that we might share what we've experienced with the world around us. These birth moments happen all the time if we stop long enough to notice them. And they're moments not unlike the one that the Grinch himself experiences at that critical turning point in his story. Grinch heard with his heart, and it tripled in his eyes. You know, sometimes it is the smallest things that can make all the difference in our lives. A young girl, a song, a glimmer of light, a baby born in a backwater town. These small things that make all the difference. I wonder, what if, for the rest of this Christmas season, you shifted your focus to the small gifts around you? What if you decided that you were going to intentionally look twice at people and things that you might just as easily choose to ignore? See, when we pay attention to the small things in our lives, what often happens is we end up with this deeper understanding of the way that God pays close attention to us. I want to invite you to go ahead and stand. We're going to sing one more song together before we head out of this place. And one of the words that you're going to hear repeated a few times in this song is the word glory, which is this really churchy word that I think often we sing without really knowing what it means or stopping to think about what it means. And in essence, when we sing, we give you all the glory. It's this fancy way of saying we are turning our focus to you. And so may you hear these words with your heart. Really take them in as we sing together.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Take a moment to follow our podcast on your preferred platform, and be sure to download our app to stay informed on everything happening here at Crosspoint. And if you like what you heard today, don't hesitate to share it with a friend that might need to hear it too.